Hey guys, continuing. Iamblichus Exhortation to Philosophy, chapter 19, about happiness. This couple paragraphs about happiness. I really like this when Iamblichus talks about comparing a rich man to a poor man. I really like it because about maybe 12 or 13 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I had quite a lot of money. I was in my early 20s and I had a lot of money and I was squandering it, like ridiculously squandering it. I was on drugs, I was drinking a lot, like constantly, and just going really downhill. And then if we compare that to how my life is now, it's ridiculous in terms of money. I don't have any money. Whatever little money I have goes straight to pay the bills. So it's because I squandered everything I had. I was investing left and right without knowing what I was doing, and I was just wasting money on very expensive trips all over the world, on women and so forth. And in the end, I was left with nothing, and I had to start from scratch. I left my career as well, which was business psychology, business consulting, and I started to focus on therapy more, pretty much fully focus on psychotherapy. So I had to basically start from scratch. I left all my contacts, all my companies I worked with, and so forth, because it was more in line with what I believed. So I really like it when Iamblichus talks about a poor man and a rich man, because I can directly relate to both states and remember, and it triggers a lot of different experiences and contrasts. And here we go. In this part of the chapter, Iamblichus talks about self-controlled man versus non-self-controlled man, and he talks about happiness. And this is why I really love this stuff. When we look at rich people and poor people, and we look at happiness, because it proves to us that money does not buy happiness at all. What buys happiness is what Iamblichus tells us. Self-controlled man, he says, because he's self-controlled, his happiness rests within himself. As I understand it, there's like a loop that is created. If I observe how I feel now compared to how I used to feel then, there is a self-reliance that is created, self-renewal, literally like a cycle, that you pick yourself up. You feel low and then you kind of pick yourself up without relying on other things, by certain ideas, or by just simply by relaxing, or even you don't have to pick yourself up much. The level of happiness becomes more and more stable, and gradually it rises higher and higher, dependent on how much down the path of philosophy you have gone. So Iamblichus says, self-controlled man his happiness rests within himself. And because of that, his happiness is constant. Life changes in his life, and I'll give you some examples that Iamblichus says. Things come and go into this person's life, children come and go, but he neither rejoices too much, nor he grieves too much. He's in a constant state of happiness. Possessions also come and go. He might be poor, he might be rich, his body might be healthy, or it might be ill, but his happiness level is more or less stable. And what is responsible for that is self-control, as we hear from this chapter. And here we can glimpse a little bit into Buddhism now. Buddhism. Because if we remember Buddhist sutras, Pali Canon, and if we remember one of my favorite texts, which is the Buddha's word, which is when Buddha was speaking and his disciples were, well, they remembered it afterwards, word for word, because of their incredible memories, and then they wrote it all down. And there Buddha gives the instructions to different meditations and the contemplations. And he says if those are done, it will not matter to you pretty much what is going on around you or what is going on within you. You could be, and even he goes even direct. He says mosquitoes will bite you and you will not care. You'll be in a state of bliss. Injuries will happen. You will not care. You'll be in the state of bliss. Whatever is happening to your body or around you, you'll be constantly in a state of bliss because you have evolved yourself so much. And how do we get to that? By developing self-control and the certain contemplations. But without self-control, none of those meditations and contemplations would be possible. So we see how Platonism and Buddhism fuse together, at least on this concept, that one would not be possible without the other. If anything, self-control is the root from which we then do our meditations, do our worship sessions, and so forth. Whichever religion we follow, be it Buddhism, be it Greek religions, or anything else, Christianity. Okay, so this is the self-controlled man. Self-controlled man's life, Iamblichus tells us, is ordered. It is valiant. I don't know what that word means. It is wise. I just picked some words that he used. And then if we look at non-self-controlled man, what happens to him? His happiness, he might be quite happy, but his happiness is dependent on others. And Iamblichus says, this basically is a problem, because other people will fluctuate in terms of their behavior, in terms of how they are towards us. And this means if we're dependent on them, these fluctuations will cause us unhappiness. Our happiness levels will fluctuate with other people. And if our happiness is dependent on anything other than ourselves, then it means it's dependent on external things, essentially. This is my elaboration. It's dependent on physical things. It can either be dependent on physical things, or it can be dependent on our own contemplations and our own self. If it's dependent on physical things, in the physical environment, whatever it is, it could be possessions, could be feeling powerful, feeling respected, or anything. Being in a relationship, anything. If it's dependent on physical things, then life will change, as it constantly does. And with that, we will fluctuate like crazy, depending on how dependent we are. And our possessions will change through life, and with that, our happiness will change also, hugely. And we will experience a lot of unhappiness during all this time. Life will become chaotic. And Iamblichus says, most likely we will be horrified of death. And even if we're rich, we might feel miserable. And we can kind of figure out and see how this works, if we remember the previous chapters. And then Iamblichus gives us the song of the poets. Oh, this is beautiful. Let me write it so that I don't forget it for my other channel. So Iamblichus gives us the song of the poets. And to quote, he goes, I do not sing for the man who accomplishes noble things without justice. For an unjust man Okay, let me do it again. I do not sing for the man who accomplishes noble things without justice. For an unjust man, let nothing good ever be his. And this is kind of like a curse, I guess, by the poets, by the masters, by great thinkers of ancient times. So as I understand it, they're saying if a man has accomplished things in an unjust way, nothing will be good. And if nothing will be good, this man will be miserable. It is a curse and I guess an observation of reality. And from the previous chapters we can see how if he accomplished anything without justice, it means he accomplished it without order. If he accomplished it without order, it means his accomplishment is sitting on disorder and chaos. Imagine if you had a building that was the foundation of which was not structured and ordered. If it was chaotic and disordered, this building will collapse. It will crumble if there was chaos underneath. No matter how incredible this building may be, order is essential. This is how I understand this. So it is pointless, absolutely pointless and dangerous and painful to accomplish great things without justice, to steal, to lie, to cheat, and so forth, to get things. Because we're building it on chaos. And even if we have a little bit of brain, we will see that if we build something on chaos, physically, it will either crumble straight away, or it will be extremely shaky and unstable. And it will then, a little bit of wind will blow and the whole thing will collapse. And we see this all over the place. We see this with politicians who scammed and cheated their way into power, and then a smallest scandal brings down their entire empires that they have built. A very irrelevant small scandal. And I'm not going to give any examples, but at the moment I'm making this video, which is August 2018. Politics is really funny, international politics. Because huge personalities, very high in political circles, are crumbling down very fast because of very small scandals that appear and reveal how fake and how much disorder and chaos was underneath, and injustice was underneath what these politicians and wealthy men have accomplished. And they are finally being brought to justice one after another, and the whole world is watching at the moment. Again, I'm not going to give any names, and the whole world is like, wow, what is happening? It is, in terms of observing justice, this is beautiful. And I hope I didn't upset anyone at the moment who is political. Hopefully not, because I didn't give any details of anything. I didn't even say which country I'm talking about. I could be talking about some country nobody knows about. We will never know. Okay, so that's it for this part. Let us do a quick meditation now. Let us do any meditation you want to do. Thank you, guys. Click on the video now if YouTube will show you one to keep watching this channel.